or join the team at sport-social.co.uk.
Hello, welcome back to the Masterclass, the tactical podcast. I'm Haider Rubbani. I'm your host as ever today. Rob, Manchester United have put in a fantastic performance, 2-0 in the Manchester derby, the 185th. Almost a complete performance, I'd say. I'm absolutely buzzing. Everyone in the comments is buzzing as well. Welcome back. How are you feeling after that? Because I know you actually predicted that United would win this game. So tell me the lottery numbers for this weekend.
Well, I'm the crazy man, aren't I, in the crowd, that I predicted that we would win this match. The reason why I thought we would win is mainly because most people said that we couldn't. And Manchester United are very, very good at bucking the trend. The problem is when we play Crystal Palace and everyone thinks we should walk it, that we actually have a problem. Today, fantastic performance by Ole and the boys. I think Ole set the team up perfectly. They played with vigour. They played with pace. They played with hunger. It was a world-class press that, you know, we've seen a few times this season, but maybe not every week. And they gave everything. And I think Bruno Fernandes said it before the game. He talked about what he feels that the team is capable of and the standards that he should set and the rest of his teammates. But today they really did bring it. Manchester City had a bit of an off day. I think they were very average today. And United needed that to obviously win this match. But I think in terms of the setup, normal what we see there is on the screen, a 4-2-3-1. Obviously, Fernandes sitting in the pocket. Martial starting because Cavani was out. And Anthony Martial had a fantastic game. For a player that has been much maligned in recent weeks, he gave a man and a match performance along with Luke Shaw. I think they were our two best players.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rob. I was absolutely delighted for Martial because he's a player that's had a lot of criticism. He's a player who's not hit the heights. We know what he can do. We saw at the end of last season, he had a fantastic goal return. He was pivotal to everything that was positive for United going forward. But one of the biggest positives today, Rob, is that if you look at some of his hold-up play, the way that he carried the ball, he was really a focal point for United to build off. And that was what was massive for me. Looking at that formation that we've seen here, it seemed that we would play on the counter. I think that's very fair to say. It's what United do very well, very good in the transition. But what was actually very, very surprising, this is the second time now in two big games that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has done it, is that we press very aggressively. You saw Lindelof and Maguire sit up with a high line. You saw United compact, and in that first 10 minutes, they were the better side. We got that penalty, fantastic by Martial to evade, a few of the players from City side and to get the penalty. And what a start within the first minute.
Yes, and I said after the Chelsea game, I thought that was a dress rehearsal for this match. People didn't expect United to play a high press in that game. They thought that they would sit in a low block and that they would hit Chelsea on a counter-attack, especially now we're under Tuchel playing a more passing, progressive style that Chelsea are playing rather than they did under Lampard. And I thought we'd see that today, and that's exactly what we saw. We saw United from the first second of the game press really, really high up the pitch and try and catch City on a counter-punch. Now, we know United can play counter-attack against anyone. They're a quick side. It's what we've seen in the past. But they now need to develop that style, and that comes from the first wave press and the second wave press, two things we've spoken about quite a lot in depth on this show when we talked about tactics. I think what was really good was obviously winning that penalty was a huge bonus, putting you into the lead. But it's the position it gives you in the game. It allows you to then go and do other things in the match. So having that 1-0 buffer zone, it actually kind of, in some ways, was detrimental to United later in the first half. But they sorted that out. And in the second half, really, when you look at the game, obviously Luke Shaw scored the second. United could have won this 3-0, 4-0. Could have been even more. United had chances today. And that was the idea, was that United could play aggressive attacking football at the times that suited them to actually really kind of pick apart what City have done really well in recent weeks. And that is be a kind of strong defensive unit.
Absolutely. I think one of Martial's, it's a massive praise for him is that he made Stones and Diaz look ordinary today, Rob. He really did. One of the bonuses to Martial, I do want to talk about him in a bit more depth today because he's someone that we've criticized, and rightly so. He's not been good enough. He's someone who has been on the receiving end of some unkind words from the fan base. Again, some of it warranted, some of it not. But looking at him today, what he does fantastically well is the way he can operate in tight spaces, which is what you need today when Man City are pressing you. And the second thing I do want to say about him as well is that he's actually very, very key in Manchester United's transition. He's one of the few, I would say, in that front line that carries the ball really, really well. And what he did today, which really, really impressed me, is that his pass completion was 95%. Now, to have that as a forward while you're looking to play some incisive passing, it's fantastic.
It's amazing. 95% for a centre forward in this kind of game in a 4-2-3-1 against a team like Manchester City. To say that he completed 95% of his passes, that's outstanding. And it shows the kind of play that he is and he can be. I think what we saw today was Anthony Martial maybe rolling back a few months, going back to maybe where he was at the end of last season. And it was that form that earned him the opportunity to be the first starting number 9 this term. Now, we know this year it's gone wrong for him. It hasn't worked as the number 9. Cavani's come in, giving United something different. Ole likes the way Cavani plays in terms of his aggressive nature, his movement around the box. So that's been a problem for Martial. But today, no Cavani. So no problem. It's up to him. And I think that was how it was put to him, was that he was going to have to go and do that number 9 job today. What was really, really good was that he, as a player, he can play off the defender. So he doesn't need to be tight. He doesn't need to have his back to goal per se. What he can actually do is find those pockets, which is what he's good at. So he can drop a little bit deeper, pick the ball up, turn and run. And that was something that he did really well. And as you were right to highlight there, he's really good in transition. I don't think Bruno was fantastic today. Obviously, he scores the penalty, so he gets his name on the score sheet, and that will feel good for him, obviously scoring against a top 6 team, as that's been the talk of the town in the last few days. But more than that, he was trying about how did that front 4 work? What was the balance like? Were they able to hurt Manchester City? I think on another day, they score more goals. They actually had the opportunity to really put the City team to the sword. But I don't think anyone would have said before the game that the way it all played out was exactly how it was going to be. But when Manchester United are aggressive, I will say it again and again, they are very difficult to beat. And when they're aggressive, they are coming out for the points. United came to Etihad today to win. They weren't coming for a 0-0, and we've seen plenty of those this season. They were going to the Etihad to expose Manchester City. 21 games, winning on the streak. It's a fantastic run. Probably the best team in the world, as I called them earlier on in the month. I think they are. But United showed that they're getting closer. And that is what I keep saying about this team. I know people on Twitter are going, well, we're not closer because we're a billion points behind City, and City of this and City of that. Forget about that. We're second in this league and we deserve to be second. And really, if we'd sorted 2 or 3 or 4 other games out that we'd drawn, we would be within that real, small space between us and the top of the title. So I'm happy with where we are. I think today we saw the real Manchester United.
A lot of comments here. We've got one here from Rob that I'm going to read out. Credit must go to Ollie. His tactics won the game and Pep didn't have the answers. And another comment here from Sam. We need that aggression week in, week out, Rob. Absolutely, guys. Thank you for your comments. Keep on getting them in. That is very key, isn't it, Rob? That the credit to Ollie. And I said to you off air that the fact that he's got the better of Pep Guardiola as many times as he has, the fact that he's the first Manchester United manager to win 3 times in a row away at the Etihad, or Main Road as it used to be called. But the fact that he has done that, and he's one of the, and when we look at Pep Guardiola, one of the greatest managers of all time, let's be honest. He might have had a lot of money, but he's still an absolute top drawer manager. Not bad for someone with no tactics, which likes to be thrown around a lot. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, what I commend him for is in these sort of games where he's got to set up and he's got to nullify and then also hurt a team, especially in the big games. We haven't seen the execution quite good enough against the likes of Chelsea and we had Liverpool as well. But the fact that he's able to do that is very, very impressive. And if United can now find a way to win these games against sort of the Palaces of the world, the Sheffield Uniteds of the world, well, then you're looking at us much closer to Manchester City, and you're looking at a title race. Where I'll disagree with you, and I've said this over the last few days on Twitter, is I think we are still quite a considerable way behind Manchester City, but the gap has been closed. I think if players come in, the gap will continue to be closed. It's not as simple as bringing X player in and suddenly you're this much closer. That's not how I see it personally. I will say that the gap has been closed, but I still think that we are quite a considerable way behind. But if we secure second, a good finish, and we invest properly in the summer, no reason why we can't be a lot closer.
Well, if the Manchester City who turned up last season had turned up this season, the one that lost 9 games in a whole campaign, Manchester United would be winning the title this year. So it's never a relative like for like. Yeah, when we compare ourselves to Manchester City because they're the top of the table, we're not saying, are we like Manchester City? Well, let's put it this way. Pep Guardiola is without a doubt the best coach of his generation. You know, certainly if we believe that Alex Ferguson is the greatest manager of all time, in that space since Fergie and onwards, it's certainly Pep. And Pep plays a certain style of football. Now, that style of football wouldn't really suit Manchester United. It's not the kind of game that we would want to see played at Manchester United, even though it's very successful. And he's done it at Bayern Munich. He's done it at Barcelona as well. But I think when you look at what Ole's doing now, we get caught up in all of this gumph from what fans want. You know, I want to be entertained. I want to win. I want to see passion. I want to be happy. All of these kind of things that are all very arbitrary. And you can never hit them every week. You just can't. You know, when you go to Crystal Palace and it's -3 at pitch side and it's foggy and it's cold, there's every chance the players won't be as good as they were today where the conditions were perfect. So you've always got to weigh stuff up. You know, it's not as an easy game of just kind of looking at something and calling it something else. But at the same time, I think Manchester United fans need to kind of realise where this football club has been and where it is now. 2 years ago, after Jose Mourinho, this club was on its knees. It was nowhere. It was probably going to be outside the top 6. It really didn't look like a Champions League squad at all. Ole's had to do a lot of rebuilding within that. In a space of 2 years, and this is not trying to bang the Ole drum, this is just facts. In 2 years, Manchester United are now the second best team in the country. They are above a very bad Liverpool team, having a terrible time of it, but they're where they want to be. And you just said there, you know, are we near them or are we not? It's not a case of are we near Pep Guardiola, because Ole isn't Pep Guardiola. But I tell you what, Ole knows how to beat Pep Guardiola, and he's beaten him, and he's beaten him, and he's beaten him. So now it's about So when we talk about winning the title or doing well in the Premier League, we're not really talking about Manchester United and Manchester City. We're talking about Manchester United and Burnley, Manchester United and Crystal Palace, and Manchester United and Southampton. So this year we played Southampton and we beat them 9-0. Whereas in previous years, we've struggled against them. It's about working out those games, finding the tactics to win the matches you should be winning. You could lose to Manchester City 10-0 twice in a season and still win the title. You can. It's a physical fact. But what we need to see from Manchester United is consistency. So we need to see players that some weeks look fantastic, other weeks maybe look a bit jaded. We need to find a balance. We need to buy new players that take us on to the next level. But it's never as true as the Twitter doubters. The Twitter this week who've been absolutely killing their manager, killing their team. They are much more embarrassing than any poor Manchester United performance. They've been chasing their coach. Why? Because they don't like their coach. That's what it comes down to. Lots of them like Mourinho. There's still those guys there yapping away. He's at Tottenham now. You could follow him to that football club if you love him so much. But I'm happy with what this manager is doing with the resources that he's given. And I hope that in the summer, he goes out and makes good purchases again, because he's done that for 2 years. And that should take us even closer. It might not take us to the title, but it might make us a consistent side where every week we're expecting to win, because I think that's where we need to be as Manchester United. We should be a team that expects to win every week, especially against teams outside the top 6.
Yeah, well said, Rob. I'm going to bring up a question here by Ants Boy, because I think it's relevant to what we're sort of talking about before we move on to Luke Shaw. And guys, I want to hear your thoughts on Luke Shaw, because he was absolutely fantastic today. For me, Martial was man of the match, but Shaw was top drawer again. So, Rob, the question here says, does the team have a tendency to step it up based on the opposition and not turn up against the bottom teams? It's something that has been discussed, and it's been a problem for Manchester United now for 7 years, I would say. I think we've improved in this regard. I wouldn't say it's a mentality problem, Rob. I do genuinely think it's the fact that when you play lesser sides, majority of the time, I would say not every single team does this, but they're going to sit deeper. They're going to play a low block. And right now, Manchester United don't have the technical players in midfield, and I believe possibly in certain other areas, maybe right back, maybe right wing, to break down a low block. They don't move the ball quick enough. They don't utilize the wide areas well enough, and that's the reason. Rather than, I don't think it's necessarily a mentality problem. I think they just benefit from today, where they have less possession, where they're quicker in transition, where they're more devastating on the counter, and that's why they have the tendency to find the bigger games perhaps easier to win than the smaller ones.
I think it's a bit of both. So what I'll say is this, is that most teams who are, say, smaller than Manchester United and smaller than Manchester United and City, when they play both of our teams, they will set up in a low block. That's what they do. Manchester City are designed as a product by Pep Guardiola to counter that, to know what to do with that. So you have players in midfield, you have technical players, you play through the lines. They don't even play with a striker. So that's how they play. Now, Manchester United do play with a striker. We play a different kind of football. And as Ole said today, he wants to go back to a United team that attacks. Now, when he says go back, that's a kind of little bit of kidology, because I think that's what United want to do every week anyway. They are an attacking side. They certainly don't play negative football. But as you highlighted there, they do find it more difficult against teams that sit and soak. So you look at Crystal Palace, they're kind of a perfect example. A team that actually did really well with the ball at their feet against us. But they are a team that are going to slow the game down and make you have the kind of combative challengings in certain positions that you don't really want. So if you're Bruno Fernandes, you're going to have to drop really deep. Someone's going to follow you. They're going to track. They're going to hurt you. And you're not really going to be able to get into the game. So we saw that with Bruno against lesser teams as well. Funnily enough, it's been highlighted about his lack of production against the top six, but it also does count, I think, against lesser sides. So that's what I think is the issue, is that Ole has to find a way of bringing in one or two ball players. So, for instance, you highlight every week, McFred, you talk a lot about their ball playing skills. Today, that was evident, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a problem. They gave the ball away about 25, I think, times between them.
They gave the ball away a lot, but they were also a significant part of the success today. Why? Because they pressed Kevin De Bruyne and they never gave De Bruyne 1 second on the ball. Now, Kevin De Bruyne against 18 other teams in the Premier League, 19 teams, he will get time. But McTominay and Fred both made sure he didn't have time today. And I think that was a major part of why City didn't tick. If you allow him to tick, you allow Sterling on the left to run with the ball and to get more at Wan-Bissaka, all of those little jewels, United won them today. That's why they won this game 2-0. And yes, we want to see more passing football. Yes, we want to see them to be able to play it between the lines a little bit more. But at the same time, you cannot give away your most important weapons. And United really are a transition team. And when they play in transition, most teams in the Premier League can't live with them.
I do agree with that, Rob. Let's talk about Luke Shaw. And I think we talk about Luke Shaw nearly every single week. And I'm so happy, Rob, we're talking about him in a positive light, because, a year ago, if we'd done this podcast, we wouldn't be doing that, would we really? Or we'd be saying, is Luke Shaw good enough to be a left back at a club like Manchester United? Is he good enough to be a title-winning left back? Does he get up the pitch well enough? Has he got the engine to do that? Has he got a good enough end product? Endless list that you expect from modern-day fullback. Rob, 1 goal today. Probably should have had 2 if you look at the shot earlier on in the first couple of minutes. Looking at the statistics here, I mean, they don't look like they're outstanding statistics. 1 interception, 1 block shot, 1 tackle, 49 touches, 87.5% pass completion. That's 28 passes and 2 shots on target, Rob. But the way that he drove up that left flank today, the amount of times he overlapped for Rashford, the amount of times that he got into dangerous areas, he never stopped running. Huge threat for Manchester United and a really key part of their attack. He's getting better and better. I agree with you. Currently, he is the best left back. You said this for a while. I do agree with you. And what a fantastic job that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has done in developing him. What a fantastic job by Luke Shaw for getting it as well, because it's not just a manager. You have to do it yourself, don't you, as a player? You've got to take ownership of your development, of your career, where you want to be. We always knew that Luke Shaw had the talent, the leg break, the mental impact of that. I couldn't be happier, Rob, for a player like Luke Shaw. I really couldn't, because he, for me right now, has been United's player of the season, and he is a main reason why United are sitting where they are in the table.
Well, I'm delighted for Luke. I really, really am, because there's never been a doubt about his talent. It's just about whether the end product was there and whether he could kind of go to the next level. Big shout out to Usman, one of the friends of the show. I was on his show at the start of the season, and he did a little segment in his show about who could be Manchester United's player of the year this year. And when I said I thought Luke Shaw could be the player of the year this year, everyone kind of went, what? And it was right. People were to say what, because it was really based on a theory rather than reality. And the theory was that if Luke Shaw could become one of the best left backs in the Premier League this season, that Manchester United would jump on levels. So we're talking about a team that came third last year, but probably should have come fourth or fifth, but overachieved. And this year we're talking about a team that are currently second. Yes, a little bit off the title, but still further on. One of the big parts of that is the fullbacks and what the fullbacks do. And Luke Shaw obviously being the primary fullback on the left-hand side. For me, he is United's player of the season so far. I know Bruno has racked up all the stats. And at the end of the season, Bruno's probably going to win player of the year for Manchester United for the club, no doubt. But I think when you look at what Luke Shaw is giving, like getting that ball off Henderson, and we'll talk about Henderson as well after this segment, to get that ball off him on the halfway line and then drive it to the box, that's world class. That's world class. Not many players can do that in the world game, not at this level. So,
and not fullbacks, Rob.
No, but that's the modern game. Yeah, the best fullbacks in the world. That is the expectation. And one of the things that a lot of people say to me on Twitter when I talk about overlapping fullbacks and whether you play asymmetric or whether you kind of push up and have a high press. One of the things they always say to me is, "Oh, I want my fullbacks to defend first." That's what they always say to me: defend first. But that's okay. Yes, defend, but attack first. Defending comes second now, because that's up to your centre-backs to be able to work with you and your defensive midfielders. Luke Shaw does it all. Luke Shaw defends. He's almost perfect on the back foot. He's fantastic on the front foot. He can cross the ball. He showed today he can hit a target. He did it a couple of times. And I think there's more to come from Luke Shaw. So what we're seeing now is fantastic. However, I think we're going to see a lot more from this player. I think he'll get his England starting spot back at left back. I think that's the next step for him. That's, I think, how he will see it in terms of progress. He's proving that he's the happy medium between what you want from a fullback and what you might get from, say, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is fantastic on the front foot, without a doubt the best progressive right back in the world when he's on his day. But as we've seen for the last 6 months, not really been on his day, has he? You want balance. You always want balance. You don't want to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, as they say. So I just kind of look at this and I say to myself, Luke Shaw, you're doing all the right things. Keep putting in these performances. And for me, he is Manchester United's player of the season.
I agree. And we've got a really good comment here from Joseph saying that Jose made the United fans believe Shaw was done. Ollie made Shaw believe in himself and us, and he wasn't even near done, just getting started. Great comment, Joseph. Thank you.
One thing I just said to that, just before we move on, I just want to say this about that, and because I think it's important. Manchester United gave Luke Shaw a big new contract when Jose left. And the reason for that was that the club and the coaches and everyone who's involved in the staff believed that Luke Shaw could be more than what he was, or certainly what he was being sold as. And he was given a contract of 3 or 4 players were given new contracts, and he was one of them at that point. And it was a kind of show of faith to say, do you know what? You're not the finished article. Yes, you broke your leg. Yes, it was horrendous. Yes, it's taking you time to get back, but we believe in you. And it's saying that you believe in your player is a really potent cocktail. It's really what players want. They want to know that when they're going to training every day, that they have belief in their manager. Now, the problem with Jose was that he took that out of too many players, and eventually he paid for it as a coach. And that was what the board saw. That's why Jose's reign came to the end that it did 2 years ago. For Ole, I do think there's kind of a little bit of both. I think he has got the tactics, but I also think he's got supreme man management skills where he gets inside players' heads and he makes them believe in what he's saying. And you can see that in some of these players. Anthony Martial, if we're going back a year, say he was where he is now or under Mourinho, we'd all be saying now he's finished. He's gone. And we've been saying the last few weeks, maybe this is the end of...
I said, to be fair, I will put my hands up and I said he's finished. Look, it's one performance, but
one game, exactly. Yeah. It's one performance. But what you saw today is that there is still a player in there. Yeah, so it's up to Ole to find that player, to connect with him and say, do you know what? You've not been good this season, but do you know what, mate? I believe in you, and I believe in you, and I'm going to keep picking you. And he's tried to play Martial into form today. I'm sure if Cavani was fit, Martial sits on the bench. But Martial took his chance. He looked fantastic today. He looked dynamic. And he looked like he didn't really care of where he was. He wasn't like, I'm here to kind of prove a point. He was just the best version of himself. And I think what was good today is we saw that from several Manchester United players, that they were the best versions of themselves. And I think you have to give them credit, but you have to give credit to the guy that bigs them up, blows them up, and pushes them forward, because that manager is doing something behind the scenes that's very, very positive.
I'd argue as well, Rob, before we move on, that if Cavani plays today, he doesn't carry the ball the way Martial does. He's not as good in the transition. For me, I'm not sure that he wins the penalty as well.
We've not won those games, have we? Look, when Cavani started as a 9, we've not won those games. And when Cavani starts games, we don't score from the off. We don't. Yeah, we do score later on when he comes on. So when he comes on for the last 15, 20 minutes, you need an injection of energy. You need a little bit of Tevez, a bit of a dynamo to come on and push and run and be kind of aggressive in those moments. Then I think Cavani is perfect. I would give him a contract for next year. I'd say, thank you very much, Henderson. We want you to stay, and we want you to, whoever the number 9 is, whether it be Martial or Haaland or someone, I want you to be at the football club because you have a use. I don't think Cavani is an option as a starter, not for a long-term starter, because I don't think he gives you what we saw today. And that is, if you play transition football, Cavani's not your best striker. Your best striker in those areas definitely is Martial. That's why he was the number 9 and given that role last year. But then on top of that, you're looking more towards Mason. Maybe Mason could do that. Bar that, Haider, you've got to go in the transfer market. You've got to go and buy a proper number 9 who lives in the penalty box, who just lives and breathes the air in that space. He's not really bothered about anything else. And when he gets the ball to feet, he's going to score. We saw today, Rashford got good chances. Martial got good chances. They both missed them or didn't take them. I think if you're putting that at the correct player's feet, someone like Haaland, he doesn't just hit the target. He probably scores, and then you win this game very, very comfortably.
Yeah, there was that one moment, and we spoke about it off air, where Marcus should have hit it straight away, and then you had Martial, who maybe he thought he was offside. That was my first thought. Maybe he just hit it at the keeper because he thought it'd get blown, but obviously he was onside. So, we do need more of that killer instinct, I'd agree. Here's a comment, Rob, that's quite brilliant about Luke Shaw from NZZZ. Shawshank Redemption. That is fantastic.
I love that.
That is brilliant. That might be the title of this podcast. So thank you very much. But before we move on to Henderson, there's a good comment here from Lakesh, which I'm going to read out, Rob. And he says, I think the key in today's win was to keep Cancelo out the game. The moment I saw Kyle Walker come on, it was clear what had happened. Absolutely. One of the first things that I said before the game was you got to keep Cancelo quiet. He doesn't play like a traditional fullback. He likes to come into midfield, and he's made things happen this season.
Cancelo's, he's an amazing player.
Amazing player. I mean, he would be I'd love him at Manchester United. He's an absolute top right back, especially on the front foot. But he was absolutely anonymous today. Man United dealt with him very well. And what you saw is that Pep took him off. And that was huge because he's almost that sort of, I would say he's a game changer. That's how good he's been this season. Gundogan's been fantastic, but Cancelo is the one that, for me, has made things happen. And when you saw Walker come on, we saw a few times Walker putting that cross in for Sterling, and Sterling had a poor game today. But that was massive for United. I think one of the things that Ollie implemented well today, and I've got to point out Marcus and Dan James, because I thought they tracked back so well today. They came back every single time. They helped the fullbacks out, and I felt like they helped to limit the space that Cancelo had to operate.
Yeah, totally. And I think with Cancelo, he is not your normal fullback. So when we talk about the Luke Shaw doing fullback things and what we expect, Cancelo kind of rewrites the script completely, because he plays on the right, he can play on the left, he's suddenly in the central midfield, defensive areas, then he's attacking, then he's a number 10, then he's all over the place. He's an amazing player. What United did today very well was two things. They pressed, so they went high up the pitch and kept City in areas that he didn't really want to operate. But more than that, they were combative. So what we saw was that the fullbacks didn't really sit in a flat back four. You even saw today, which again, it's the Chelsea formula. It's what United did in the Chelsea match, was that both our centre-backs lived pretty much on the halfway line. Now, that's really, really difficult for Jesus and for Sterling to kind of navigate, because it's not what they're not used to playing that. There's no real space in behind because there's so much space. Very, very difficult to work the ball back from so deep. But you even saw with Mahrez wasn't really, he got in kind of two or three positions that he likes to be on the edge of the box on the right-hand side, but it wasn't natural. So what Ole did there successfully was he analysed what Manchester City does, and he worked a way around it to formulate his own team to be able to do things that are both positive but allow United to then play in transition. And United did that so well today, and as I said, this could have been, it's 2-0 and we're happy with that. We'll take that every day of the week at the Etihad, but it could have been 3, it could have been 4, it could have been even more. And that's what I'm impressed by. I kind of look at that and say that had United had their shooting boots on today, this could have been a real embarrassment for Manchester City. And it also shows that John Stones is still John Stones. He's played well this season and he'll probably get back in the England team, but you can hurt him. You can make him dilly-dally on the ball. I thought Diaz was okay today, but Diaz wasn't particularly tracking Martial into the areas that Martial wanted to go in. So I think City had a little bit of a blip today as to all the things that have been working week by week. However, what City are good at are beating the teams outside of the top 6. They go and play them, they beat them comfortably, and they go on. That's how you win the title. What they're probably not so good against is teams like United in a derby game where everything's up for grabs and they can't quite produce the performance. I think De Bruyne will be unhappy tonight. Gundogan, Sterling, we just said Cancelo. I think Mahrez, I think all of them guys didn't play well today, but it's because of how United played them rather than what they did.
I agree with that, Rob. Let's move on to Dean Henderson because he was key, wasn't he, for that second goal? Great throw. We've spoken about distribution a lot. We've spoken about whether he's good enough for this short game, with his feet, something that he's going to have to learn in the role he's going to play. Ollie wants to play out the back. I'm going to couple this with a question from Show in here saying, can you touch on how well we look playing out from the back with Henderson than with De Gea? I personally didn't see, we didn't have as much possession, so I didn't see us, or we didn't get to see Henderson with the ball at his feet as much as to make that assessment for me personally. But you might have seen that differently. But what was brilliant today from Henderson, he's so commanding, isn't he? And I actually questioned, I have questioned Henderson. I'll be honest with you. I thought, a lot of people want him to come in, but is he quite ready? And I've said this a few times on this podcast, but you can tell that there's definitely more calmness with the two lads in front of him, Lindelof and Maguire, two lads that get a lot of stick. Again, they were fantastic today. I thought they defended very, very well. But Henderson, key for the goal, great throw to Shaw. Obviously, we discussed Shaw's run, commanding the area, consistently talking. We know David De Gea has had a daughter, I believe. So congratulations, David. And he's spending a bit of time with his daughter. Henderson's got a massive opportunity here. And I do thoroughly believe that if he performs, and he has performed in the last couple of days, but he'll be taking that number 1 spot. And definitely more vocal, wasn't he?
Yeah, De Gea is going to be in quarantine because obviously he's in Spain, so he won't be able to come back straight in to take his spot. So that's why he's not in the team. I think when you look at Dean Henderson, is he ready? These are kind of the big encompassing questions that I always ask. Is he ready? Yes, he is. He's ready. He's an international class goalkeeper who needs a chance. So now that De Gea is out of the team, you have to kind of look at it, run with it and say, right, what's going to happen? So you just said there about ball at feet, and I think that's quite important. What he does different to David De Gea is that David De Gea quite often complicates stuff. So David De Gea will play the short pass, he'll play the longer pass, but he quite often tries to play diagonals to feet. Now, when you play diagonals to feet from, say, the penalty spot, your own penalty spot, into a corner, it can be really difficult to hit all the time. There's an accuracy issue there, just because you're a goalkeeper. Now, if you're Alisson or if you're Henderson, then yes, you're good at that. You can do that. But we know that our goalkeepers can't do that. It's not what they're good at. So you have to do the simple stuff. And I think what we saw today from Henderson was that he's pretty good with his left foot, with the simple stuff. He can play 10, 15, 20-yard balls. And that's all he's got to do. He doesn't have to be a sweeper keeper. He doesn't have to be your Franz Beckenbauer at the back with gloves on. He doesn't need to be any of those kind of things. He just needs to be able to play it simple, quick, effective, and with efficiency. And he did that today. And I think that showed in United's play is that when the ball went to the centre-backs, it went very quickly to the fullbacks, it moved very quickly into midfield, and it came very quickly back inside. And that stretched City to kind of be out and in, and that made them retract, and that hurt them. And that came from the goalkeeper. So I think we saw enough today with that at feet, he can do it. He doesn't need to be playing these raking passes. We don't want him to be this kind of like amazing ball player at the back. He just needs to do the simple stuff. You could say the same about Maguire and Lindelof, couldn't you? You could say, do the simple stuff, please. Don't try and be clever. Don't dilly-dally on it. Don't try and beat 4 players. Just do the simple stuff. And they do that well together. That unit of Lindelof, Maguire and Henderson undoubtedly works. So because it works, I would be tempted to run with Dino to the end of the season. I think that he's good enough. I think it would be hard luck on De Gea. I don't think he's done loads wrong this year, though he's not particularly been, I would say, world class. He's been good at times and other times very average. But I think if you're looking forward, you're looking to challenge next season, are you challenging with David De Gea or are you challenging with Dean Henderson? If you're thinking that you're challenging with Dean Henderson next year, then make that swap now. Do it now. Put De Gea on the bench. There might be a case that De Gea comes back in because Henderson might mess up or get injured and then De Gea gets his chance again. But I think you go with the kid for now because I think he's ready. And this Manchester United team, there's nothing wrong with competition. Yeah, if you've got two players fighting for a spot, play the one that's on form. And Henderson's clean sheet ratio is very, very good for a goalkeeper who is like effectively a reserve,
isn't it, Rob? I think.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is. And I just think like today, you know, the good thing is that he does the smart stuff simply. So, for instance, from a corner, yeah, he doesn't get bullied ever. Yeah, he comes. He's strong. He'll come and get that ball. He doesn't really mess around. De Gea might come and punch the ball and go for it, and that's the way he does it. Whereas Henderson's got, you know, a little bit more kind of strength and a little bit more body strength in those areas. That's his style of football. And you saw with the save that he made today as well. Again, coming out big, anticipating it really well, not waiting to kind of see what happens with the shot, but making his choices early. And I always think that confident goalkeepers do that and modern goalkeepers do that. So he ticks those boxes for me. It's time to give Henderson a run.
I agree, Rob. And like I said, great opportunity for him. And it would save United a lot of money, wouldn't it? Not having to, you know, go and buy a brand new keeper, for example. I know, let's say De Gea does leave. They've got one that's homegrown and he's English.
People say to me all the time as well. People say to me all the time. Yeah, people say to me all the time about De Gea. They go, "Oh, but he's on such a big contract. You won't be able to sell him." Yeah, that's a question that's been asked a lot. And the thing is, it's a non-factor. And the reason why it's a non-factor is that if you want someone out of your football club, you just have to pay them off. So if for instance, De Gea doesn't work for you anymore and you gave De Gea a big contract, you have to think Alexis Sanchez. You know, you have to work on that contract and say, well, do you know what? We don't want to give you everything, but we'll give you 60%, 40%, whatever we can negotiate with your agent. That's what you do. So if that's where we are, say at the end of this season, and Ole goes, do you know what? So Ed Woodward, my boy is Dean Henderson. I'm going to stick with him. It's up to Ed Woodward then to negotiate a package for De Gea to leave. And I'm telling you this, if De Gea is on the market, they will still get a very, very good transfer fee for him. He's still only like, you know, is it late 20s, early 30 years old? Yeah. There will be teams that will look at David De Gea and say, do you know what? We might not pay you what United were paying you, but we'll get pretty close. And that will allow United to execute a deal where they make 20, 30 million on him because that's what they would probably still command in the open market. It won't be a problem. It just depends on whether you go with one goalkeeper or the other.
It's also a good problem to have, Rob. Having two great keepers or two very good keepers, I would say. And yeah, it's going to be a Courtois check situation. I think Oli has to probably follow what Chelsea did and give the younger, the one with more like longevity, the one with a higher ceiling to improve, because obviously David De Gea is not getting any younger. But then keepers do have I mean, I expect David De Gea, Rob, if he does, let's say, go, you saw PSG obviously linked, you know, Pochettino's not convinced by Navas. It wouldn't be surprised me if he went to, let's say, PSG and was really, really good. But that's not really the point, is it? I think it's time that United do look to move away possibly from...
David has openly said that he's very happy in Manchester. And people will say, oh, that's because you're on a big contract. But you then can say to David De Gea, you know, this is a competitive team and Dean Henderson is now my number one. You're not my number one, but you've got to fight. Get back in training, show me in training that you're the number one. And this is really how football clubs work. This is how what you say to players. You say, prove it. You know, so if David De Gea loses his spot, he's not losing it to some kid. He's losing it to potentially England's number one for many, many years to come. So this is a good goalkeeper, a goalkeeper who has aspirations to be the best. So he might not be the best, but that's the challenge. So I would say to David De Gea, yeah, if you don't want to move, then I'll keep you. I'm not saying you're a number two, but you've got to fight with this lad for this shirt to prove that you're number one. And when you get your chance, then you have to show that you're perfect once again.
Agreed, Rob. Guys, we're going to take some of your questions now, so please get them in. Thank you for all your interaction. As always, question here, Rob's saying, is our pressing game a new weapon against top teams or something that will be constant? I think that's a great question. And it's actually something which has taken me aback especially in the Chelsea game and today, I did not expect us to be that aggressive, and I really commend Ollie for being brave and doing that. I expected us to play on the counter, which we essentially did today, but I thought we would sit deep. And it's quite brave, isn't it, to do it with Lindelof and Maguire, who are not the quickest centre-backs, obviously, as that's been said. But it's something that works. United's fullbacks aggressively pressing the opposition fullbacks. McFred actually works very well, doesn't it, in terms of getting in there, getting in the centre park, disrupting, winning the ball back. It's definitely something that works. I would like to see us press more as a side. I think at times we've been disjointed, and what I have noticed is that, let's say when Cavani's playing or sometimes Bruno, they both have the tendency to be quite exuberant. They both have the tendency to press before anyone else, and it makes it disjointed. But as a team, in the last couple of games, we've pressed really, really well. And is that something you want to see more?
Yes and no, because it's about the opponent. So people think about philosophical styles. So we talked a lot about Pep early on and said how he sets up. His is very much a philosophical style. It's how he wants his teams to play. It doesn't matter if you're 1-0 down, 2-0 down, 3-0 down, or 10-0 up. You're going to play the same style of football as what Pep Guardiola does. Jurgen Klopp also has a style, how he likes to play, further up the pitch with a press. If Manchester United played 60-odd games a season and played the kind of press that they played today, they would be dead after about game 23. They would be finished. The season would be over, because you just physically cannot put that kind of effort in against every team. What you have to do quite often is pick the lock. So if there's a team like, I don't know, let's do the one I like to use all the time, the Burnley analogy. So if Burnley are going to play two banks of four and sit deep and play a low block and all of that, you have to find a way of working through that. You can't play a high press because they'll gobble you up and just kill you on the counter. So they'll play one up top, they'll go long, they'll go over the top of you and you're dead. That's the end. But Man City are not going to go over the top of you so you can press. I think United need to find that style question somewhere in the middle. There's times where counter-attack is always going to be best. United are a great counter-attacking team. They didn't counter-attack today, Haider. What they did was they played through the lines. That's what they did. They allowed City to come onto them a little bit, but it wasn't the classic United low block, almost like 4-5-1 almost in shape. It was much more fluid. They played through the lines a little bit more. And they didn't rely on pace today. What they allowed themselves to do was play good football. So it went from the fullbacks to the midfielders and the midfielders into the forwards. It looked like a proper game of football. I think we'll see it more. I think Ole will see this as a success, both against Chelsea, where Chelsea really didn't get a lot of change out of United. Obviously, and that was a little bit more of a boring game. But today, United got what they wanted, and that was the win. And that's how you have to view it. Yes, tactics are about winning. Someone like Mourinho will bore the hell out of you, but if he wins 1-0, he doesn't care. Ole, I think, gets that he can't do that as a manager. That won't be accepted in this incarnation of Manchester United. Sometimes the press is the right thing to do. Sometimes counter-attack is the right thing to do. The most important thing to do is to use the system that works that week so you get 3 points.
And also having a squad which is capable of doing more than just one thing. We've seen with Liverpool at the moment. And look, it's great seeing them lose all the games that they have. I think, I actually said maybe about a month and a half ago, I don't see Jurgen Klopp staying. You've said, I've seen several times on Twitter, you put up the graphic of Dortmund and his time at Dortmund and the decline that you saw there. Jurgen Klopp is undoubtedly one of the best managers in the world. He's got a bit of credit in the bank. But one of the criticisms I do have of him is that when plan A isn't working, where's that plan B? Yes, he's had Van Dijk injured, but that doesn't constitute what you're seeing at the moment. So I think that's probably one of the positives with Ollie. Yes, I like a manager, or I like a manager to be have more of an encompassing philosophy. That's just the way I like it personally, and that's my preference. Some people don't have that preference, and that's totally fine. But what Ollie does have, I think, is there is a plan B, isn't there? There is tweaking. 1 week we'll play a high press this way, the next week will be more of a low block. So, he does adjust to the opposition, which is what you should be doing, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. And when you think about it, you just said that you like philosophies and things like that. We've just had two managers before, Ole, who were absolutely those coaches. Two coaches with fundamental, real tactical principles of how they played the game. You know, you look at Louis van Gaal played a slow system coming up from the back, possession style, almost like Ajax 2.0. That's his way of playing. It's the Dutch way. And when you looked at Mourinho is Mr. Low Block. You know, Mourinho could play a team like Burnley and he would still play the low block, even if there was one striker, because that is a philosophical approach to the game. Now, you get freaks like Pep. Pep is a freak. You know, what he does and how he kind of reinvented the game. You know, playing your right back like Cancelo as a central midfielder within the game is weird. It's not normal, but it's also kind of beautiful. You know, it's
without a striker as well, Rob. The way that they're playing without a striker.
You know, like you saw Aguero sat on the bench today kind of looking like this. And he's not going to get back in that Man City team. He really isn't. He might get chances, but his career is over at Manchester City. They will look to buy a centre forward who might be at Borussia Dortmund at the moment. So they will look for that because they know that will take them to the next level again. That's what your striker does. But I think when you kind of look at Ole, I think Ole is a little bit of jack of all trades, but he understands that the United way of playing football is to attack. And that's what he does. I don't think that this team in general has weeks where when it doesn't play well, like the Palace game, it's just because they haven't played well. It's not because they're not trying. It's just because something's not right up there or something's not right in there or something just in the middle. Do you know what I mean? It's a problem in terms of
concern, Rob.
Yeah, but also one thing I must say, Haider, and this is what I try and say on Twitter, but without 3,000 tweets to kind of back it up. And that is some weeks the problem is not tactical. Some weeks it's just that the players are rubbish. So this is kind of the balance. So today, Manchester United players were certainly not rubbish, but if they had been, they'd have lost this game. So it wasn't the tactics really. The tactics were there. They're spelled out to the players. The players go out there and execute. But say against Crystal Palace, where the tactics were, again, a normal 4-2-3-1, play through the lines and do your game. They just couldn't do it. They just couldn't get up for it. And as I said, I think today on Twitter, actually, I said that it felt to me when I watched that game that I had one eye on Man City. And it happens. If you're not quite the best team, if you're down here a little bit,
didn't you?
Well, that's normal. It's normal down Twitter, isn't it? But, you know, if you're not the very best team like Man City and you can't go on a 21-game winning run, and United are not that team yet, if you're kind of somewhere below there, you do have to sometimes pick and choose and go, do you know what? We're knackered in this game, so we're going to try and win it, but it's going to be a tight one against Palace, but then you blow it because you draw 0-0. Or then you go and play Man City and you say, right, we can't play like that because we will get hammered 5-0, so we have to bring it. And that is the balancing act. So I don't worry about those things. There's lots of kind of people who kind of go, oh, yeah, but he didn't have the tactics for this game or didn't have the tactics for that game. Quite often this season, it's more about United's performance rather than the tactics. So that makes me feel happier. I look at that and I kind of go, no, the tactics were right, but the players didn't bring it for whatever reason. Could be, you know, someone's carrying an injury. We talked about Rashford for weeks, haven't we? Rashford's gone off.
Let's talk about Rashford. There are a few questions regarding Rashford. Is it, I mean, it looked pretty serious, if I'm being honest with you, ankle injury. Ollie has commented on it. That's a big loss for United, isn't it?
It's a big loss, but you know he's going for a scan. But again, maybe an enforced layoff is what he needs. You know, I keep saying this. He's played all season long with injuries: a big shoulder injury, a back injury, constantly with muscle injuries. I think he's injured almost every week. You know, I think even in the first minute of this game, he kind of got caught and he was limping immediately. And I was thinking, it's not that Rashford is made of paper. It's just that he plays every minute.
He's overplayed, Rob. If I'm being honest with you, if there is a criticism of Ollie on overplaying two players, Bruno's overplayed. I think Rashford's overplayed.
But Haider, if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and you earn the big money and you've got to make that choice and you sit there on training and you run the rule and you say these two players are my best two players and I've got to play them even though they're knackered and I've got to do it because if I don't, my Donny van der Beek ain't working, and I can't play Scotty in a different way or Fred in a different way. Then it's a problem. Paul Pogba's out the team. You then have to play your best players.
I agree with that, but conversely on that point, there's been games, for example, the Sociedad game where neither of them had to play. We were falling up. There's other few cup games where they haven't had to play, where they've come on and they've started. Look, the 45 minutes, people think it's just 45 minutes here, 45 minutes there. It's not in the grand scheme of things when you accumulate it with how many games they have played. I think I saw a graphic, Rob, and you've probably seen this going around. I think it was Amazon Prime Sports or someone like that, or BT. Of the top 5 players who have played the most in the league, 4 of them are Manchester United players. That's Harry Maguire, Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford, and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. You can interpret that in two ways. You can interpret that as in Ollie doesn't trust what he has on the bench. He doesn't have enough quality. You can. I don't really buy that fully, if I'm being honest with you. Or the second thing is that he's not rotating either well enough or probably I don't really want to say it in this way, but probably he isn't doing it in a way where he trusts everything else that he has at his disposal. I mean, that's the best way to say it, really.
No, I disagree with that totally. I think that if I'm the manager of Manchester United, I'm going to play the team that wins. That's what I got to think about every week. If I don't win, if I start losing games, I'm going to get sacked. So that's how managers think. It is a kind of, if you have a big squad like Pep Guardiola and you can rotate in world-class players week in, week out, and like Bernardo Silva, you can just kind of pluck from the bench and throw him in. And, you lose someone like Kevin De Bruyne for weeks, but you put Gundogan then and Gundogan starts playing like peak Borussia Dortmund Gundogan, then great, you can do those things. Manchester United haven't got that. And when you look at it, right back is a big problem. We haven't got a real contest there. Centre back is also a problem because Eric Bailly's been injured in and out, and Tuanzebe's hasn't seemed to be ready. And then when you kind of look at those two other players, Bruno Fernandes is almost undroppable. He wants to play every minute. And I think Rashford is the next player down from that. And the reason why Rashford has played a lot this season and there hasn't been that rotation is because Mason didn't play for months. So when you look at that balancing act, I'm not too harsh on Ole in that. When you said there about the 4-0 with Sociedad, again, my job as the manager is to get this team into the next round. So if I feel I have to do that, then I'm going to do that. And I don't care if a fan criticizes me. I don't care if the channels jump on my back or pundits say I'm this, that, or the other. I have to do what I feel is right. You bet your bottom dollar that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would have liked to have played Donny van der Beek a lot more this season, but he obviously feels he can't because of what he sees. He's not going to play players that are going to lose him games, because you know what, Haider? We're going to be doing a masterclass saying this manager should resign or be sacked. We're not doing that at the moment, so he is doing something right.
It's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. I still think there have been opportunities to rest those.
Dan James played today. Can you imagine if we said a few weeks ago Dan James was going to play against Man City? We'd have all gone, what? Dan James is playing against Man City, yet Dan James played today in the biggest game of the season. So he is rotating players in and out. So now that Marcus is probably going to be out for a while, Dan James is going to play more.
On the left.
Yeah, on the left. Right. You're going to play Mason on the right. You're going to play either Cavani or Martial through the middle. You might play Martial on the left sometimes. It gives you options. So this is why you do it like that. I don't think that, when we look at Marcus, I think he needs some time off. I think just away from the pitch, just go and get your head right and get that kind of there was a great moment today, obviously, where he got the injury, where he sprinted back and he got that touch back. And that's when he kind of got the contact. And that's when he kind of his foot went. And that was unfortunate. But it was good that he did that, but his press has not been good for weeks. For weeks, he looks tired. He looks jaded. He looks a little bit mentally fatigued.
There's this massive, I'm going to say lack of knowledge or misconception, because people think, oh, he's being lazy. No, he's injured. He's been injured for ages.
Lack of knowledge.
Yeah, it's a lack of knowledge. I see that because there's certain section of the fan base that use it as a way to say, oh, well, Martial gets stick because Martial's not injured, mate. He's just not. He's not trying. He's not pressing to or doing the basics well enough. Whereas Marcus has been injured. That is the reality of it. And Ollie has played him a lot of the times. But Rob, I want to move on quickly to a question here. It's about Paul Pogba. And the question says, do you think that Pogba signs a new contract? I really hope he does. With his injury record, COVID impact on club finances, don't see Real Madrid, Juventus taking a chance on him this summer. They probably can't afford it, if I'm being completely honest with you. And Manchester United need his creativity in midfield. You've definitely seen, Rob, the impact of him not being in the squad. It's limited Ollie's options. And that's why I do give Ollie a pass on this, because when you're looking at what he's got in midfield, it's Nemanja Matic, McFred, and that's about it, because Van der Beek has also been injured. He doesn't really play deep as well. But it seemingly looks like Pogba could stay, dependent on, who is able to afford him. He's looking at PSG. There might be a possible destination. Is there a scenario where Paul Pogba does sign a new deal at Manchester United and we get to see him at Old Trafford, maybe for a year or two more?
There is a possibility that he signs a new contract. Absolutely. That is being widely touted now. That's the narrative. The reason why that is the narrative is that Paul Pogba continually says to the right people, that he's happy at Manchester United. He's not saying, I'm unhappy. Now, I know that the world takes their cue from Mini Raiola. And again, this is a social media driven thing. You know, like Pogba doesn't really say a lot. Pogba, when he's asked, he does the Ronaldo thing of, you know, only God knows and that kind of thing. And that upsets United fans because they kind of want it straight talking, you know, Mancunians. They just want it kind of as it is. Just tell us as it is. If you hate us, tell us and you can go. It's not any of those things. What it is kind of business, first and foremost, but also, can Paul Pogba win trophies at Manchester United? So that is the question for Paul. Paul has to kind of say to himself, right, am I happy where I am? Now, again, people don't want to admit this, but Ole has done a really, really good job with Paul Pogba. You know, he's in the guy's head. He knows how to motivate him. You saw when Pogba came up from his latest injury, how good he was before this next injury. And that's another big question for United. United have to say, do we give this guy the big money to keep him, or is he going to get injured? Because Paul Pogba has shown over the last year that he's had 2 or 3 significant injuries.
Ankle injuries specifically, Rob.
Ankle injuries. They are different ones. So this last injury he's had is a different one. So it's not the same. So United do not feel the kind of maybe the anxiety around that maybe fans do. But that's the big question. So can Paul Pogba take you from second to first? Well, not on his own, but if you keep Paul Pogba and you give him the money he wants and you give him the contract he wants, and then you say, right, Paul, we're going to go and put a world-class striker in front of you. You know, the one I want. So if you put him in front of you, or you go and get a Jadon Sancho to balance out the right, because that's what you want to do. If you make those right signings around the existing players, then there's every chance that Paul Pogba says, I would like to stay. Because he likes it in Manchester. He's actually happy in the city. You know, he said it plenty of time. He's quite a demure bloke. He's a family man. Yeah. He doesn't go out drinking. You know, he's religious. He's quite calm. He's kind of got all these things going for him. He
just wants to win. That's what it is. He
wants to win, and that's the thing.
For that, it's nonsense.
Yeah, and also, like, you know, there is also that dream scenario that, you know, a boy from Paris, you know, either going to, say, Real Madrid or going to Paris Saint-Germain. Those two things might appeal to him in the kind of wider scope. He might look at Juventus and say, well, you know, Juve have not had a great time this year, so I could go back there and help them again and win the title. But I don't think he probably want to win, you know, Serie A for the 400th time or whatever it is. He's not. I don't think he's interested in that. I think he's interested in winning the titles that are there on the shelf that people want, and that the big one, of course, is the Premier League. So he wants to win the Premier League. He wants to win the Champions League. If United end up second this season, there is a chance he signs that deal. If United say slip and end up 5th and are not in the Champions League, I think that might prompt him to say, right, I would now like to move on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of United's most important signings possibly this summer would actually be to sign him on with another contract. If you can show the levels that he showed before his injury, Rob, then you know, he's an asset for any team on the planet, really.
Look how much poorer we are without him in general. I keep saying this to people. This is the world that you should expect without Paul Pogba leaves. So in your kind of, people don't like Paul Pogba, but in your post-Paul Pogba universe, this is the Manchester United you've got. So it might mean that you sell Pogba and you say, even if you get the big fee for him, say you get 80 million, you know, that's kind of the going rate, which would be what we paid. If you got 80 million for him, can that 80 million either be carved up so you go and buy players who are as good as Paul Pogba, or give you the same thing as Paul Pogba, or even give you more? Or do you stick with Paul Pogba, pay him because he deserves it, because he's a World Cup winner, and then you go and find a striker of the 60 to 70 to 80 million pound range that helps you push on? I still think for Manchester United, those are the kind of the options. Yes, I would like to see a ball-playing central midfielder come in. Yes, I'd like to see a centre-back come in. But I think all of those things are not always a priority. Like today, we saw United stopped one of the most prolific teams in the country, and they still did it, and they did it through shape and discipline. You can do that. I think what's most important is finishing. Today, United couldn't finish, but still won the game. However, if we drawn this game 0-0, we'd be sat here now. What would we be saying? Martial missed chances, Rashford missed chances, Bruno wasn't very good. And I think that's important today. Bruno on the front foot again for
wasteful, Rob, wasteful.
Wasteful, tired, just trying too hard, maybe, just not, you know, still pressing, but doing what you want him to do, but not giving you end product.
Quality on the ball, that's it's not his work rate.
It's mental fatigue. It's mental fatigue. It's coming towards the end of the season, and I think that he's got to the point where he's carried the club long enough. So now it's up to other players to get into shape. It's a shame that we can't just drop Donny van der Beek in, but the truth is we can't. You know, he can't do what Bruno does. He doesn't score goals like Bruno does. He doesn't do the same work rate. Doesn't do the same press. But it might mean that, say, if we can get Pogba back in the next few weeks, and I don't know how likely that is, then you might be onto something. Pogba might be able to knit together that attack from a deeper lying position, as you've talked about before, and might be able to get United moving up the pitch quicker. Or you just kind of have to deal with it. You just have to go out there and play better. You have to say to Bruno Fernandes, yeah, you're tired, mate. You'll have a holiday in the summer. Just get on with it. And I think that's kind of...
You could probably play... Let's say Pogba does come back. You want to give Bruno a rest. Play Pogba further forward.
But like I often talk about Pogba in the number 10 role, Paul Pogba's played the number 10 roles about as many fingers as I've got. Yeah, he doesn't actually play that role. So it's, again, a fantasy that fans have that Paul Pogba's on the edge of the box, you know, curling it in the top corner as a number 10. He's never played that role. He can score from there. We know he can. We saw earlier in the season that he is lethal from those areas. And he likes to play an advanced role, but he likes to play on the left in an advanced role. That's what he likes to do. He likes to play with someone inside him. So it'd be difficult for him to be the central figure because he certainly wouldn't be able to press the ball like Bruno Fernandes. And then what would we all be saying about Paul Pogba? Paul Pogba is lazy. That's what fans would be saying. So I'd rather Paul just does what he does best, and that is either in the pivot or on the left-hand side of midfield.
Absolutely, Rob. And when you look at Van der Beek as well, we haven't seen a fraction of what he's capable of or what we want to see from him. So hopefully when he does get back to fitness as well.
Very disappointing.
Yeah, he has been very disappointing, you know, and I've looked obviously at his performances and I've thought this isn't good enough, really. And you're not someone who can play deep either. That's another thing which we've spoken about many times. We're not going to cover that again. But, you know, one can hope when he comes back, maybe the penny will drop. Maybe he'll be able to adapt a bit better because the system's not going to adapt for him. He has to adapt to the system. And this is what fans need to understand. We're not going to change everything. Let's not tweak the system completely just to fit Donny van der Beek, who quite frankly doesn't deserve or hasn't played well enough to even warrant that. Like Bruno Fernandes has got the best statistics out of any number 10 in Europe. You're not going to push him further back just to fit in Donny van der Beek. And that needs to stop that view because it's just not really logical, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, at the moment, am I playing a knackered Bruno Fernandes or a fresh Donny van der Beek? I'm playing a knackered Fernandes, you know, and this is like the same issue with Marcus. We've said that Marcus needs a break. He'll now get an enforced one. And that happened the season before, obviously, as well, when he had the back injury. But I think that's where Ole is. I think Ole watches them and kind of looks at the progress reports and the fitness reports and all the status that he gets and all the feedback from his coaches. And I think all the feedback and everything he sees says, you play Bruno Fernandes, you play Marcus Rashford. We might think, give him a rest. But I think that he's only playing them because he feels he has to, not because he's got favourites or he's kind of playing that game. I think the other players who are there, you now have to look at that and say, right, do we need someone that can come in and do a job that Marcus does next season when we look at the transfer market? Is that player Jadon Sancho? You know, that's what we have to kind of look at. Is this the right player for the right time? He might be great talent, but is it what the team needs? And I think that's what every signing should be based on.
Yeah, very, very fair. Rob, final word. Fantastic performance today. Almost in some respects a complete performance, but we got the result as well, which was very, very important. You know, amount of times we've played well, we haven't got the result, played poorly and haven't got the result. So that was fantastic. Manchester United have obviously got the Europa League on Thursday against AC Milan. I expect Oli to put a pretty strong side out for there. But look, the league's now cut to the top. I don't think we're going to win the league, but it is 11 points. United won to get back into second. That was important. Leicester City, who have absolutely shocking injury record, but you don't hear anything from Brendan Rodgers. He's not doing the full-on the Klopp dance like Klopp's doing, or the pundits aren't fawning over that. So the fact that Rodgers has got his team sitting up right behind Manchester United is a fantastic achievement. He's done a really good job there. Everton and Chelsea play tomorrow, so it was very important United won that game. Chelsea have looked strong under Thomas Tuchel, but you know, United second in the league. What would you like to see going forward, and what's your final word?
Well, watching Brighton in that match against Leicester and see them give away those 2 goals and obviously Leicester win, that kind of turned it up for me a little bit, because I think that United would have seen that and gone, right, you know, there's no get out here. If Brighton beating them 1-0 in that game, and you've got a little bit of space and a little bit of daylight with you in Leicester, then there might just be a tiny little switch off somewhere in the Manchester United mind's eye, but there wasn't. What we saw today was Manchester United saying, we're not scared of you. We know you're very, very good, but we're also very good. And we're good at what we do. We might not be as good at what you do. We're never going to be Manchester City 2.0, but we are Manchester United 2.0. They have the philosophy of Fergie. They have that style of football. They want to attack. They want to play front-footed football. And that's what's been missing, Haider, for 5 of the 7 years, is that in that period, we tried to kind of tweak the philosophy. We want it to be a modern team. Well, of course, modern football dictates everything. That's how the game is. You know, your fullbacks push up, you pivot to something different. Strikers play on their own now rather than in partnerships. But I think with Manchester United, we saw today that this United team can compete. And if this team can compete with Manchester City, it can beat every team in the Premier League. It proved today on that hallowed turf for Manchester City fans at the Etihad that we could go there and not just beat them for what is it now, the 3rd time in a row? I think Ole's done him, there. Ole has a perfect record there in terms of in recent seasons. We showed that we can kind of nullify them. We can actually take the battery out of the pack and make them be less. And when you do that, that's a great thing to take forward, because then you believe that you can do that to other teams. So, like they can go play AC Milan. AC Milan are all right. They're not a great team. They've done all right. I think Zlatan's injured. Is that correct? So Zlatan may be out of both.
I think Pioli said today that he's possibly he looks like he could be fit. So
okay, well, Zlatan, he might just miraculously, like a phoenix from the flames, rise out of the ashes and come and punish us. That's what he does. That's what he is. But when you look at the kind of the setup of that team, being the way that this game went against Manchester City, they might go into that game and be really, really good. You might see that kind of that self-esteem and all that confidence rush back to them, because they were there not that long ago. We always get caught up at United game to game to game, and we obviously had a 10-game stretch where they won only 3 out of 10, but only lost once or twice in that little run. And none of us are impressed. None of us are happy with that. But it doesn't mean the team has changed. It doesn't mean that behind the scenes that they're any less happy with who they are. I think that they'll go forward in this Europa League tie. They'll try and obviously put in a good performance, get the victory. But for me, it's about the Premier League. If you get knocked out of the Europa, I can forgive that. It's just a cup. If you get knocked out of the FA Cup, I can forgive that. It's a cup. Anyone can win those games. But winning in the Premier League is everything. And this is what this Manchester United team now needs to learn, is that 3 points against Crystal Palace is just as vital as 3 points against Manchester City. And when they crack that, and I think they will next year, I think that's when it will be, not this year, but next year, I think this Manchester United team will be title challengers.
Strong words, Rob. Thank you for joining me as always. Guys, thank you for all your fantastic comments. As you may already know, this podcast is now part of the Sports Social Podcast Network, the first UK dedicated sports podcast network. You find all of our shows on their website, and that's www.sport-social.co.uk. So definitely go and check that out. You can find all of our content there, and you can also see a nice little write-up about myself and Rob, if that's what you want to do. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.